Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to all to the final formal committee meeting of this municipal year. I have received apologies from Councillor Johnson, and Councillor Gilbert is in attendance from Sheffield City Council. Councillor Kidd, Councillor Nevitt is here as the nominated substitute, and I had apologies from Councillor Moynihan and from the Mayor, Oliver Coppard, who is with our best buddies in China at the moment. Right, item 2, urgent items and announcements. There's been a slight amendment to the order of the agenda. Items 10 and 11 have been swapped. So the Safe Place to Sleep programme update will come first. The final report on bus reform will then follow. Are members happy with this amendment? I see no. Good. Unfortunately, due to exceptional circumstances, no officer will be able to attend to present item 10. 12, sorry. I can't read. On the SYMCA corporate engagement framework, and I'm minded that we will discuss if anybody's got any questions that we can put to the officer for next time, and then we'll have this item on the next meeting, unless people are in disagreement with that's the way I intend to do it. Okay. Right, okay. Item 3, items to be considered in the absence of the press and public. There are none. Declarations of interest by any members. Do members have any declarations of interest? No. Okay, thank you very much. Reports from and questions by members. I don't have any for this meeting. I have had and then moving on to agenda item 6, I have had a question from a member of the public. I'll read the answer, but they are not in attendance. Yeah?
That's correct. So the question is as follows. The Mayor has expressed optimism about government support for key projects in South Yorkshire, such as the Doncaster-Sheffield Airport reopening. Could the committee provide an update on the specific avenues SYMCA are currently exploring to secure financial backing and address operating losses? In particular, does this support initiatives like establishing a free port or accessing additional government grants, and what progress has been made on these fronts as of March 2025?
Thank you for that. The Mayor has given his apologies for this meeting. However, we have the following response to the question. It's not too long, so I'll read it out. The Mayor and officers of the MCA, along with colleagues at City of Doncaster Council, are actively working with government officials to identify how best government and its agencies could support the South Yorkshire Airport City project, and how South Yorkshire Airport City could contribute to government's growth missions. These discussions are ongoing. The MCA has also provided financial support to the City of Doncaster Council to support necessary operational costs in the new financial year, including the investment and market engagement required to support a thriving business. The MCA will conduct further assurance work ahead of the summer to ensure that should it choose to proceed with a long-term investment, the business has the best chance to succeed, protecting public funding. And I presume the new financial year is the year 20... Yeah, that's correct. Thank you very much. So that is the response. Right, item 7, minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of February. Are members correct that the minutes are an accurate record of the meeting? Scrolling through. Any opposition? Anybody who wishes to raise anything? No. So we'll take those as read. Right, okay. Item 8, review of the action log. Updates of matters arising are provided in the action log, provided in particular. The log contains responses to a number of queries raised at the last meeting. Do you want to go through any of them at all?
Not those ones individually, so the updates provided to those queries are as they are written in the paper, but one update we have which is followed the publication of these papers is on so page 13, minute number 174. So this is around the MCA board's response to the recommendations made at your previous committee meeting about implementing the scrutiny protocol in full. So the recommendations of the board were that they noted the progress around implementation, noted the resolution of the board, noted also ongoing work from the government and commitments made in the devolution white paper. In response to the recommendation of the committee, no recommendation was made on member remuneration, and members noted that further work was subject to outcomes of the devolution white paper and work with the portfolio holder. And they approved recommendations on provisions for scrutiny of portfolio leads, and also approved invitations to chairs of SYMCA's committees to attend the board at least on a yearly basis. You'll all receive the minutes of the meeting when they're published automatically in your inboxes, and we'll circulate a link to the webcast of the meeting. And just on that, as scrutiny officer and monitoring officer, myself and Rebecca would take these outcomes to the portfolio holder, that's Councillor Chris Reid, for further consideration and steps.
Rebecca, can you just on regarding members' allowances? I think what I have been informed is that potentially when it's implemented, that it's regarding the individual councillors' constitutions and who pays the allowance and how. Is that am I correct in that?
So in consideration of member allowances, there are two options. Local authorities individually can remunerate members for attendance on outside bodies, and the MCA now has the power to remunerate members of its committees. So there's some work that would need to be done with the local authorities further to understand the interplay between that and the constitutions of the local authorities. And that's something further that I'll discuss with the portfolio holder now that it's been considered by the MCA.
Yeah, Brian first.
I think if they're looking at paying allowances, they should look at it the way the fire authority pays its allowances to its members of its committees, because they basically, I do believe it's the fire authority which actually pays the allowances on that committee and not the individual authorities, and I think they should look at that kind of process, because when you start asking individual authorities to pay differently, there'll be a different message come from every authority. So I think if they are going to pay allowances, the Mayor should look at the way South Yorkshire Fire Authority pays its allowances.
Josh first.
So the first question I have from that is, do we have a timeline from the MCA board looking at that key principle in particular? Because as we noted last meeting, that when the government was looking at the scrutiny protocol, what we gathered from that is that they were going to go further and not necessarily backwards on that. So I just wondered what the timeline is on that from the MCA board and why they chose to make that decision, because when I looked at the agenda item papers that they had in front of them at the board, there were options on there, and the option was to accept the key principles. So it appears that the board hasn't done that. Is that correct in saying that? And it did note on the papers that that would be a risk because it could lead to the MCA falling behind other authorities.
So the outcome of the board yesterday was that no decision was taken on member allowances. That means that for now the status quo is maintained. It is something that I'm very mindful that the portfolio lead wasn't present at the meeting yesterday, and I will pick up with him further to discuss what the next steps are. We don't have any timescales as yet as to what the government are working to for a review of the scrutiny protocol. But what I will speak to the portfolio lead about is providing a response to the committee following the MCA board on Tuesday.
Thank you for that. Are you happy with that part, Mick?
Thank you. Just for information, South Yorkshire Pensions did a review of allowances, and South Yorkshire Pensions realised that different authorities pay different remuneration for the same function, and they decided to take it on board and they did their own review, and that was then taken out of the hands of local authorities and paid directly by pensions. That were also a drive for their independence in terms of reliability, with relying on local authorities to pay a function that they delivered. So I thought that was certainly a positive, because that then ensured that we weren't influenced. The expectation was that they represented the pensions board and not the authority that you are elected to. David. David, I know it confirmed that.
Additionally, one of the things I would like to propose is we formally write to each of the individual board members, who are obviously a leader of individual councils, asking for their attendance at least one of the meetings in the next municipal year. My suggestion is that Doncaster won't be immediately, because obviously they've got elections, because there's a meeting in June, and we try and get somebody either from Barnsley, Sheffield or Rotherham as a first meeting, which would be more appropriate, I feel. But I'm not actually particularly fussed about which ones come first. Invite them all, and then we can see how we see how we can fit in with the diaries. But I think that's important that we need to do that. Okay. Josh, thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment, because I think, whilst I don't think the MCA board went far enough yesterday, it is a step in the right direction, and I just hope as a committee we keep looking at this and don't let it fall aside.
No, I agree with you, Josh. I think the main thrust is that obviously we're a small group on here, and we have to make sure that there are adequate resources, not just for the councillors but also for the officers, for some of the things that are in the devolution bill that potentially can add a lot of work to all and sundry, actually. And so it will be interesting to see what progress is made out of this, but at least we are making progress and just pushing to make sure that we are a scrutiny committee that cannot be that critical friend and offer a guidance and advice that we think that may diverge from what is initially proposed. Right, move on to next review of latest forward plan of key decisions. The forward plan of key decisions at the time of publishing papers is attached in the pack. I will take these as read unless there are any specific questions on the forward plan. The committee asked to note the attached latest forward plan of SYMCA key decisions and identify areas for further scrutiny as appropriate, and obviously have a good look at the what's in the forward plan, and if there's anything you want, we can look to have it as one of the informal briefings of the committee in much more detail, which have been very useful, I've found, over the last year, and whether we and what we want to take forward in the next year. So please forward any ideas to Sarah, to me, to any of us, really. Right, moving on. Agenda item 10, which is swapped with 11 or whatever it says here. I'm just trying to get which way round it is that I'm on. Right, okay. Safe Places to Sleep programme update. Andy Gates. Andy, I'll welcome you. I'll give you a few seconds to get in place.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for letting me rejig the agenda to the team. Appreciate that. I was just trying to find when I brought this item last year, and I failed to do so. I think it may have been, yeah, it was around, the decision was made by the MCA at this point last year to allocate the funding. So I think it was probably the one post the pre-election period. And at that meeting, we set out the intention to deliver the Safe Space Sleep programme. We talked about the 4 pilot areas where we were going to do more in-depth work. and the intention to appoint a VCSE organisation, Baby Basics UK, to deliver the sort of big chunk of the Safe Space to Sleep programme. And I suppose I'm sort of delighted to say we have done what we said we would do. We contracted with Baby Basics to on a 4-year basis. We hear all the time that the VCSE get short-term contracts. We were really keen to give them a long-term contract so they could invest in the capacity and capability to deliver for us. This was their first ever public sector contract, so a bit of a risk for them, to be honest. And you'll probably see in the paper that they had an established presence in 3 of the 4 places of South Yorkshire, but they didn't have a kind of outpost in Barnsley. And, you know, sort of upfront in this paper about Barnsley, we have not yet really got motoring in Barnsley in terms of delivery of equipment, because some of the infrastructure in Barnsley wasn't there. I'm really pleased to say, though, that that infrastructure is in place now, and deliveries and the programme is really starting to go ramp up in Barnsley, which is great. But just to sort of remind the committee more broadly, what we said we would do is for every child in South Yorkshire from the age of 0 to 5, we would make sure that they had a safe space to sleep. So that's a crib, a cot, a Moses basket, and all the sort of paraphernalia that sits around it, whether that's a blanket and all that sort of stuff. So what we've done, the contract with Baby Basics, is that they effectively buy that kit, store it, and then distribute it to local referral partners. One way of doing this would have been just to give every family who needed it an IKEA voucher or an Amazon voucher. Go and buy a crib, go and buy a cot. That was not what we wanted to do, very deliberately, because that doesn't provide the wraparound support that we wanted to do. So whilst this is a Beds for Babies programme, a safe space to sleep, what it really is a route in to help a family and then make sure that the referring organisation, whether that is a charity, a statutory agency, or anything in between, brings the support with it. And whilst we don't have any sort of formal evaluation or analysis just yet, what we are hearing anecdotally from some of the family hub teams is that making this type of intervention, which is quite small and quite cost effective, builds trust of that family to go, you know what, that family hub, that social worker, that community midwife, they're all right. They'll work with us. Then they can help us. So that's sort of anecdotally some of the stuff we're hearing. So we have an organisation called SQW, who are a sort of extremely well thought of evaluation organisation. So they will be doing a formal evaluation of the programme, and we're hoping that's the sort of stuff that it'll tell us, because as you will all know, like upstream interventions massively help further downstream in supporting families. So what I'm trying to do here is just demonstrate that we're really pleased with it. We're doing great stuff on it, but if you were to ask me, is it a fair distribution across South Yorkshire at the moment? No, it's not. Some places are up and running and going great guns. Some aren't. But we have a really well-established process to land that. And I suppose the second point, and it's referenced in the paper, is that what we've learned through this programme already is that services are quite stretched, no surprise. And actually, at the worst, this is a programme that creates even further stretch on really stretched teams. So, for example, if you are a health visitor and you've got a lug, a cot or a crib up a flight of stairs in a Sheffield tower block or a Barnsley street, that it's challenging, and sometimes that has injected a bit of extra challenge into the system. So I'm joined by my colleague Alice, who is our day-to-day programme manager on this, is we are just now looking at different ways where we can inject a bit of delivery capacity into the system for health visitors or statutory agencies or voluntary community organisations who could do with a little bit of help getting that final delivery. Not of the light stuff, a sort of Moses basket is not too heavy unless you load it with a load of stuff, but some of those cot beds, particularly if they're double ones, are really, really heavy. So what we're trying to do is just learn as we go, and instead of going, well, that's your money, that's your programme, like it or lump it, we are just continuing to flex it, and that's the work really. So I'll stop talking there, but this is the first kind of public committee we've kind of done any report to actually, which is quite nice.
Initially I've got Mick and then I've got Hannah. Hannah first. So wow. No, of course, stop arguing. Can we?
I'm just no.
Can we have Mick first
Yeah,
and then Hannah?
but that is me, Hannah. Isn't it? Position in Goldthorpe. I'm surprised it was slow started because I'm well aware that there is a family hub in Thurnska, and if people don't know area geographically, Thurnska and Goldthorpe are almost connected. We've got a very active Salvation Army group in Goldthorpe. I used to work in Goldthorpe as a detached youth worker, so I know it, Goldthorpe, Thurnska and Bolton, so I know it quite well. We've also got Station House Group, which is in Thurnska, but they work throughout Durn. And when we're talking about delivery of items, we've got other groups. There's an embankment group, which is mainly male, who go all over Borough doing volunteer work with other groups. So physically, they're very capable of doing the heavy lifting. And so I think if we've got area council model and Ward Alliance model, I think Cllr in area council would be a good point of contact to ensure that people are aware of everything that's going through. I know that there's quite an active church group who do look at art and development, and potentially there'll be volunteers within that group. So if you worked or googled Durn Area Council, there will be community development workers and managers within that setup that can give you the information about every voluntary group or organisations with the capability to take it on.
Brill, that's super helpful. I know we did explore with the Salvation Army whether we could use some of their space, and I think there was a good reason why we couldn't. But I will definitely pick up with because that's the model we want to do. Is again we could pay a DPD or an Every to do delivery, but actually that A is costly and B doesn't tap into kind of the local. So we'll pick that up, Councillor. Thank you.
I don't know what capacity there is for storage and other things. My wife used to work at the hub in Thurnska, and I do know that they've got storage containers that might or might not be available. But there's certainly room to put more there if necessary.
Well, I think in Barnsley we have now got a storage plan, and the community transport function is going to do some of that delivery. So I think, but if the demand goes up, which we're kind of expecting it to, we're going to have to keep layering on. So yeah.
Well, you can always contact me, and I'll go out on ground and see what's available. Definitely. Okay.
Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, I don't know that side of the borough as well as Mick does, but it is concerning that I've seen these sort of same lines in every report we've had on this, over the last sort of 9 months. It's not quite yet up and running. So are you confident now that you have got that is that what's been holding it back, the central storage location?
Exactly that. Yeah, it is now. I think it is now. They are now actually taking referrals. And they'll actually launch the pilot post pre-election period. But it is now, we're confident they've A, sorted out storage, B, the delivery of the heavy items, and C, the referral mechanisms. So what we mean, one of the challenges is, quite rightly, that you have a voluntary community sector organisation referring in. What we want to do is try, wherever possible, hook those into a family hub, rather than happen in sort of isolation. That requires sometimes fleet of foot cunning, and it takes quite a long time. Looking at Alice, who's been spending her days trying to sort this, it takes quite a lot of time to sort out. I think we are there in Barnsley, aren't we? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's good, because the Barnsley family hubs have all been relaunched over the last year. So I presume it's largely based around the hub over in Goldthorpe, but it is of course a borough-wide scheme. So if you want any contacts over on the west of the borough, the need isn't so great there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't any need. Then just link in with us.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at 2.4, 2.5. It says that there's baby basics in Doncaster, And then that you've had the launch event on the 7th of March at Mexborough Family Hub. I just wondered how that had gone, and is that something that you're going to roll out to other areas? Thank you.
Yep, so the launch, I wasn't there, Alice was there, but I think we had, one of the Doncaster councillors, Sean Gibbons, was there from the Mexborough side, and I think the Cabinet Portfolio lead in Doncaster as well. It went really well, and what was really good about these events and the other ones we've done, the families who are accessing the support have been there and telling us actually this works, this doesn't work. So that's been really positive. Doncaster as an authority have been brilliant, to be honest, as a set of council officers in making this happen. I think the model they have is actually an exemplar for other parts of South Yorkshire, connecting services in and working kind of. There's physical hubs, but there's actually like virtual hubs. Really, it's like how the system comes together, and they've been really good. So Rhianna Nelson, who's the Director of Children's Services, and Alison Fleetwood, particularly, like really good.
Can I just ask? Mexborough's one side of the borough. How will you manage to move it throughout the borough? Is these family hubs going to be where it's going to go? Is that the idea?
It's a really good question, and it's easy to focus on the hubs because we write them down there, and they're the ones. This is a universal offer right across South Yorkshire, so we're a referring partner. So one of the reasons we wanted to work with Baby Basics was they already have referral They have over 100 referral organisations, ranging from kind of mother and toddler groups to. So that's one of the strengths of that model. So it's not, if I'm honest, just a council thing. It is a genuine set of partners across the patch. Causes some challenges that, if I'm honest, but it's the right model for us, I think. So yeah, it's easy to sort of hone in on Mexborough, Goldthorpe, Swinton, and Gleadless. This is a pan South Yorkshire offer.
Can I ask, because it's I'm really pleased this seems to be moving forward, and obviously slightly multi-speed approach you've got because of how things are up, but coming down the line, obviously you've put babies into beds. I noticed you've got toddler beds in the scheme, but coming down the line at some point is when the children you're giving support to and the families you're giving support to are going to need infant beds, other beds. What can you just talk us through what your plans are, because obviously this is going to be something that, whether you see yourself as only an early years provider, up to 5 or 6, or whether how you see it progressing from now, and what plans you may be putatively putting in place.
It's a really good question, and we also have the issue about siblings. So you've got a sibling who's 0 to 5 and a kid who's 7, and so we're pretty flexible, to be honest, in how that's delivered. So that's one point. The kit we're using is their IKEA kit. A, because it's ubiquitous. B, they're quite easy to put up. C, they're extendable. So if we put them in a toddler bed in, they actually go way beyond the 0 to 5 rank. Keep looking at Alice to make sure she's nodding that I'm getting this right. So they do, where possible, we go right up to. And I think the plan is, and there is freedom and flexibility in our approach with Baby Basics, is that if you're 4 years and 364 days and you need some kit that's sort of out there, then we can invest in that. They've got a really broad range of equipment. You don't have one shot. You've had your crib. The doors get closed. We can keep going again, because yeah, you're right. Family needs change.
Family needs change as well. I mean, and one of the things is obviously breakages and that sort of thing, which are going to happen. I mean, it's not, what have you, how much you factored in for that? That sort of thing where there's breakages, loss, because obviously families move in and out and move around the country, not just within South Yorkshire. If you got how are your plans for that, and then potentially referring on to other places?
I don't know is the honest answer in terms of breakage and stuff. I think we've not set a criteria around it. Say you get one, go this, and you break it, you don't get it. So we know there are particularly challenging families who, one of the risks identified right at the outset of this was what happens if you provide a bed, it doesn't get unboxed, and you find it on eBay the next day. Anecdotally, that was identified as a potential challenge. we haven't seen that, but that's also why we were always keen that the referring organisation actually goes and checks. Has it been put up? Has it been put up safely? And are they using it? Because a family does sometimes might need more support than just providing a box with a bed in. And that's certainly the family hub's role, is to kind of go, well, actually, what else is there this family might need? But to your particular point, I don't know about the breakages one. We can come back.
No, that's fine. If you can come back to it, because obviously we want to sort of see how this develops, because it has the potential to really develop further within South Yorkshire, but also there are lessons to learn from other authorities if they decided to look at these schemes and implement them. And obviously there's no point in them reinventing the wheel. If there's things that you've found that aren't working, or things that work differently, because sometimes we presume on families, and even when we presume on difficult families in difficult circumstances that may produce challenges that we haven't necessarily anticipated in other ways. So they're the sort of things that would be good to sort of have a plan. Is it Hannah?
Yeah, that sort of links into my question really, which is, so I think it's really good to understand that the scope of this is wider than it sort of perhaps initially looked. So it's not, I think we sort of drew initially some comparisons to I think it's the Scotland government that gives the baby box thing to every pregnant parent. Clearly the scope is wider than that, and looking to some extent around, do other children in the household, whatever, also have somewhere safe to sleep. And I'm guessing that you're going to start flagging up issues around unsuitable accommodation there, and particularly around overcrowding. And so I'm just wondering what the links, what are the sort of the referral routes, the links in, because you're, I guess to some extent, seeing more than a health visitor, and a health visitor is there to sort of deal with the new baby, really, and unless that family's already under a social worker, they might sort of slip through the net a little bit. I'm just wondering how you're moving those forward.
I think it's a real challenge, because like the definition, we've had debates about what the definition of a safe space to sleep is. It's not just have you got a bed, it's all damp and mould, and we know there is probably kit going into homes that don't hit the decent home standard. And the question is to what extent can you fix all of that? And to be honest, one of the reasons we chose this intervention was, is a thing you can do. And it isn't a kind of, gosh, this problem's too big, how do we fix it? It's just an intervention that helps and builds a relationship. So a family might have a relationship with a housing officer who can go and tackle some of that, rather than pull the sort of literal or figurative drawbridge up and not engage with services. Whether that works, whether that happens, we'll have to see with the evaluation. But the key question in our evaluation framework is, does it improve trust and engagement in other services? That's what we're really testing. So we'll see whether it does or not.
With the evaluation that you talk about, which is really good, is to find out, that's the feedback we want to see, is because it's theory about the greater engagement. It'd be interesting to see how you evaluate that and how you could potentially bring it back to us or and to the board as how it works and how it has worked, and some of the things that may not have worked, which you would have expected to work. And when are you looking at, when do you think you're going to have enough data and evidence to do a proper evaluation? I mean, I know you probably could do a partial one now, but down the line.
So the evaluation process is quite iterative for exactly that reason, because we can't. You may have seen some of the analysis on the Sure Start schemes that was sort of Labour government back in the 2000s. The longitudinal study of that has only just come out, and that's 10-15 years after the programme, and it demonstrated that it was quite good. So there you go. So we haven't got the time to do that because we'd like to use this as a making an investment case for our own resource and other resources to put more into this type of intervention. So some of the analysis is anecdotal, is captured through workshops, through talking to beneficiaries and capturing that. There are some measures we're looking at, and we've run. It's referenced in the paper, theories of change workshops. It's just a posh way of saying like what you said you're going to do and what impacts it's going to have and the journey on the way. So we could definitely come back to this committee with a summary of exactly what we're measuring, what we're going to learn, and the timeline for it. I don't quite know when would the best time to do that for you is, just in terms of what we've captured, but we can go away and talk to SQW, who are the kind of consultants doing it.
Yeah, sorry, questions just jumping into my head. I know that the scheme isn't specifically around sudden infant death, but obviously having a safe sleeping space is a factor, not the only factor, but a factor in infant mortality rates. Can I presume that is something that is monitored and tracked and will also be fed into the evaluation programme? I know that's not the main sort of thrust of the scheme, but fundamentally, why do we want babies to have a safe space to sleep? It's so that we can keep them as safe as we possibly can.
Really good question. I don't know whether it's part of the full programme, but Doncaster particularly in their pilot are looking to I think it's Doncaster who are looking to do something around SIDS directly. So we'll have a look.
I presume it's tracked.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It is. Yeah, it is. It's kind of doing it. I mean, it's a challenging issue, and understanding the causality of that is still not quite been nailed down. So understanding the impact of an intervention like this and whether it makes a difference, we might be able to do something. Councillor.
My understanding is that rates have been fairly steady for a fairly long time, and so I guess it's and I think people do lots of interventions that don't necessarily make a huge amount of difference to those rates. I guess the question is, is this an intervention that makes any difference, particularly in those demographics with those slightly higher than average rates?
We'll be able to see whether there's a causation correlation. Who knows? But we should be able to see in the data.
I'll take a final question for you, Mick.
Yeah, well, it's question and comment. We're talking about mortality rates and deprivation, and that will be measured. But we've got an age-old deprivation analysis and mortality analysis in Barnsley, where Penistone on one side lived 10 years longer than Goldthorpe at the other side. And yeah, it is.
But we're talking specifically about infant death.
Yeah,
aren't we?
but what I'm saying
Not
is that with areas of deprivation do need to be monitored in terms of children's mortality. And if we've already got that study and we've got that information, what we can balance it with is where the scheme's been intensive, for example, Goldthorpe, whether over a period, maybe 5 years, if it has made a difference. And I think that would be a legitimate way to look at it in terms of challenging, or a part of challenging that deprivation. We've also got a company shop in Goldthorpe, which is another organisation to contact in terms of what we talked about before.
I'll say thanks for that, Andy. Come back with at some point, probably when appropriate, probably I don't know, a year or so, depends on the programme, doesn't it? And some updates and what metrics you're looking at and how we can. Hannah.
I would really like an update on Barnsley sooner than a year, just because there's been nothing for 9 months. So I would really like an update in 6 months, to be honest, on how Barnsley's going, if that's okay, please.
Yeah, we can have a sort of very focused. I'd say I have a focused one on Barnsley, probably the autumn, and then in about a year or so's time, when it's appropriately to programme in that schedule, about where you come back, what you're looking at doing, how you're looking at building on a programme, and the sort of metrics that you're using. But thank you very much for that today.
You're welcome, and happy to do a direct briefing, Councillor.
That's fine.
We'll sort that.
Thank you very much. I ask the committee to note the contents of the paper. Thank you. We're now moving on to item 11, swap with 10, on bus reform. Matt, I'm surprised you've still got a voice, but there we go. We'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much. I won't say too much, and I'll let you ask all the questions afterwards. So, the report follows a good number of previous reports and briefings to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, also related reports to the Mayoral Combined Authority Board, the most recent of those being 2 days ago, when the Mayor took the decision to move South Yorkshire to a franchised bus system when he chose to make a franchising scheme. So the report in your packs relates to the final part of the statutory process that needed to be followed towards that decision making. It covers the statutory consultation that took place between October last year and January this year. It covers the MCA's response to that consultation, and it also covers the recommendations and the decision making process that was followed by the Combined Authority and by the Mayor on Tuesday. I'd like to just point out that in relation to that, the administration around enacting the decision will be taken after today's meeting. So the recommendations that were made on Tuesday were structured in such a way that the MCA board, so the leaders of each of the authorities, recommended to the Mayor to take the decision to franchise the bus system, which he then did. The recommendations also covered the key financial aspects of the transition budget and the use of CRSTS2 funding, which is earmarked for bus reform and for decarbonisation. So the main content of this report, and also the MCA's report, covered the statutory consultation that, as I mentioned, took place between October last year and January this year. There's a lot of detail in the first two appendices to this report. What I've done is to try and summarise the detail of that in Appendix C. So Appendix C is a summary, really, of the information that you'll see in detail in Appendices A and B. But in summary, the consultation was overwhelmingly supportive of the franchising proposals. So over 7,800 people responded to the consultation. 87% of the public supported the proposals to franchise the bus system. The bus operators were largely supportive or neutral, with the exception of one smaller operator who was opposed in part to the proposals. The four South Yorkshire local authorities as statutory consultees were supportive of the proposals, and other statutory consultees who were included neighbouring authorities, the trade unions, Transport Focus as the passenger watchdog, and the Competition and Markets Authority were again all largely neutral or supportive. Some of the main themes that came out in the consultation were the need to manage financial risk effectively, the importance of grant funding to the financial model, the importance of bus priority measures to support efficient bus operations and an attractive network, the inclusion of services which cross the South Yorkshire boundary in the scheme, and also some concerns around the operational implications of some of the dates that were contained within the original proposal. And there were also some very practical suggestions as well. So, for example, from Stagecoach, who set out some of their experience of moving to bus franchising in Greater Manchester. So as a result of the feedback that we received, we did set out some small modifications to the scheme. So firstly, to provide some clarification around cross-boundary services and the position that we'd set on cross-boundary services, which is essentially around giving SYMCA as many options as possible in the future to secure the bus services that we need to secure. And then secondly, to improve the implementation timescales by extending the contract mobilisation period beyond the 6-month minimum that had previously been proposed, and moving implementation from October to September 2027, which is preferable from an operational perspective. But I need to point out as well that there is the ability to defer these dates in future if necessary. So finally, from me, there was nothing in the responses that we received to the consultation that prompted a fundamental rethink or change of course from the approach that I've previously discussed with this committee, which is why ultimately, based on the consultation, the assessment that we undertook, the independent audit of the assessment that was undertaken, and the previous reports that we brought to this committee and to the combined authority, we were content to make the recommendations which supported the introduction of franchising, which has now resulted in the final decision around franchising having been taken by the Mayor. So I'm very happy to take any questions you might have.
Have I got any questions from anybody? Peter?
Hi there, thank you. I'm quite new to this committee, so please be gentle. But yeah, my main thing is around the sort of 886 responses that were categorised as campaign responses. Now, I do understand the logic in excluding them from the, as it were, real responses, but I do think that that then excludes, almost devalues the responses of these people who aren't bots. They are real people who probably are quite interested in public transport. If they are, you know, maybe once in a while have responded to an email from Better Buses for South Yorkshire campaign, or maybe they saw a QR code at a bus stop and just scanned it through. It doesn't mean that they're not important. So it seems a little strange to exclude them in such a way from the findings. So my point is, and also I think on page 97, that's 4.3, section 4.3, obviously I understand this is you summarising for ease, but we've got a figure here. It says that sorry, 1 second. That 474 of the responses that were included in the real responses, as it were, have said that that buses should be brought back into public ownership or control. Now, for me, since this was a consultation on public control, as in franchising, I think I'd like more clarity on that. So, of the respondents that were considered as real respondents, how many asked for public ownership? Because I think that's really important. Obviously, we know this is the first stop. Franchising is the first stop, and we can't get to public ownership of our buses without going through franchising. But as I'm sure we all know around this table, it's not the final destination of our journey. So it'd be good to know this. It will help surely with building where we're going, the route map.
Okay, I'll try and answer those points as comprehensively as possible. So I think firstly, in terms of the campaign groups, so by no means did we and have we intended to kind of devalue the views of campaign groups. Far from it. I know the Mayor has, and certainly I have spoken directly to campaign groups, Better Buses for South Yorkshire particularly, around this throughout the consultation process and before and afterwards, and they've been excellent in terms of getting their message across. And in that discussion, one of the things that we did talk about was their role in encouraging people to also respond to the consultation in the way that we've asked them to do that. Ultimately, the analysis of the consultation we wanted to make sure was kind of fair and above approach, and we asked an independent organisation to kind of carry out that analysis in a robust way that was going to kind of give us the results and give us the sentiment in a clear and fair and unbalanced way. So I would say we spent a lot of time actually talking to campaign groups and understanding it, and I don't feel that we kind of devalued their views in that. In terms of the public ownership question, so again a few points to make on that. So the consultation wasn't consulting on proposals to directly operate the bus system, so to employ the drivers and to employ the staff. At the moment, you might be aware that's actually illegal for us to do that. The legislation prevents the establishment of local authority-owned bus companies. Now that may change in the future legislation, but as we stand at the moment, we have a process to follow, which is the assessment of franchising against all other available options, which include the existing partnership that we have now, and that's essentially the process that we followed. However, in terms of the crux of your question, which was the understanding of the sentiment around what do people think about public ownership, we are going to commission some additional analysis of the responses that we received, which helps us to understand the things that weren't directly related to the consultation in terms of the decision. So that's certainly something that we haven't commissioned that yet, but we will be doing, so I can feed that into the set of questions, and hopefully we'll be able to provide a proper answer to that.
Thank you very much.
Because I hope that when we get public, all the options, that we have potential prices for each of those options, because my understanding that public ownership will be the most costly option, which obviously within the mayoralty, my presumption is that will have an implication on ticket prices, but potentially how much of subsidy are given to those ticket prices. Right, I've got two further questions from Hannah and David.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, really delighted about this news this week. First of all, I know that this is something that you've all been working very hard on for what feels like a really long time. And it just feels like we've finally got to the answer that we've all been hoping for. Just reading through some of the responses, I sort of got the feeling that where the authority borders West Yorkshire and Wakefield, didn't see anything specifically from Cllr, but sort of West Yorkshire seemed quite positive about how this will enhance customer experience, passenger experience. Obviously West Yorkshire is moving on with its own franchising scheme. I picked up a rather more negative vibe from the East Midlands side of our neighbours. So I'm just wondering how you're going to, I guess, sort of tackle some of those concerns, because I do feel very strongly that people do not live their lives within local or combined authority boundaries, and if South Yorkshire residents need to travel in and out of the East Midlands or in and out of West Yorkshire, for work or leisure or whatever it is they do with their lives, we do want that to be as seamless as possible. So I'm just wondering what your next steps are with that.
Okay, thanks for the question. So, both in terms of West Yorkshire and I would say particularly Derbyshire in the East Midlands. So obviously the East Midlands is moving towards a combined authority, but isn't kind of quite there yet in terms of transport. So yes, West Yorkshire took their franchising decision around this time last year. So again, we've been talking a lot with officers at West Yorkshire about some of the practicalities of introducing franchising, or the potential here, which is now the reality and the reality in West Yorkshire, and what that might look like. And I think we both have an intention that bus services that cross between South Yorkshire and West Yorkshire need to be no worse than they are now, and ideally better. But the actual kind of the contractual mechanism for making that happen is still kind of is part of the discussion and an early set of discussions. The East Midlands Authority, so I think in particular Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, they were quite concerned, I think, about the cross-boundary position, and we clarified that in the MCA report, I think, to the satisfaction of our neighbouring authorities. So what we did in the report was to to be clear about our intentions on cross-boundary services, but we strongly feel that by including all cross-boundary services in our scheme, it then gives us options in the future for how we may practically deliver those services and how we may protect the network in the future. I think as well that, and Derbyshire included this in their response, that they've had experience of franchising in Greater Manchester, and have been concerned about some of the experience of that, and we're keen to kind of guard against a similar experience. And the overall commitment that we make to them and to the other neighbouring authorities and West Yorkshire is that we will have lots of dialogue about what comes next.
Could you sort of explain, because I believe that Glossop and Derbyshire were confronted with a bill which cost them 3 times the amount that their bus, is that correct? Their buses they'd been paying for their buses in Glossop as a result of franchising in Greater Manchester.
Yeah,
how are we going to overcome that? I mean, as a follow-on from what?
Yeah, I'm not too sure of the exact kind of whether it's double or triple. There are franchise bus services in Greater Manchester that go into Glossop, which is in Derbyshire. The way that was expressed to us by Derbyshire was that they had very little kind of say and oversight around what was going to happen. So our commitment, therefore, is that in that sort of scenario, we would have a discussion with the neighbouring authority and the operator about what's the appropriate way of delivering that service in the future. And ideally, we don't need permission, but we would look to try and come to a consensus with our neighbours about that on a route-by-route basis.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at item 1.1.2 and the decline in the bus mileage, 42%, which is quite significant. And I was just wondering what the ambition is to increase that mileage to get more people on buses, because there's various stops that have been finished, various routes that have been finished, but we've also got new builds in various areas as well. And whilst you've got the increase of funding support for the franchise for the buses, which has gone from 13% to 24%, what's the ambition to reduce that so that there's less support but more buses?
Okay, thanks for the question. So I think you're very much talking about what comes next now after the decision's now been taken, and that's very much kind of part of the full focus of the team since Tuesday. What we've seen over the last kind of 10 years and beyond is a pretty stark decline in both patronage on our local bus network and the miles operated, so effectively the scale of the network, and you've just quoted one of the figures there, and part of the reason why we would want to franchise the bus network is to start to address some of those challenges. So there's very little point in franchising a network and accepting further decline in the system. The point now is that over this transition period, we need to try and kind of stabilise what's there and begin to grow, and then provide a platform to be able to deliver ultimately a better network. But we need to make sure that we do that in a financially sustainable and prudent way, and make some sensible decisions as we as we go forward, and the way that we intend to do that is through engagement. So we need to understand that the network has been there for a long time and is designed around certain principles which we need to be mindful of, but we can look at things through a different lens than maybe a bus operator would. So what we want to do over the course of the rest of this year is to start to speak with stakeholders, including yourselves, about what are the priorities for the network, to see where the developments are, where the jobs are, where the issues with kind of transport connectivity are, so that we can start to put together proposals for a network which are kind of sensible and start the process of improving the network. But that's very much in the planning. What I'm doing is kind of setting out the intention for how we would like to engage with you, but at the moment we're not in a position where we're talking at a root level yet.
Right, I've got Hannah again and Brian after that.
Yeah, apologies. I'm afraid because Oliver's not here, you're going to get a couple of my Oliver aimed questions. So feel free to bat those. Feel free to bat those off. So, in terms of looking forwards and how this is going to be paid for, I think that other not local authorities, combined authorities who've gone down this route have implemented some kind of mayoral precept type scheme, specifically to improve the buses fundamentally. Do you know if that is something that is being considered and might come down the line?
I think you offered that. I could back that question off.
I do.
And I think I might, but
so.
I don't know if Gareth, it's something you'd be able to speak to potentially. So it's about the potential mayoral precept to pay for,
just if there's any
or
plans.
to contribute to franchising.
So the Mayor has indicated in his manifesto that one of the things he is interested in working towards was a travel pilot for free travel for young people. And I think if there was a precept, that's what we would precept for. There is nothing within the franchising scheme about using precept money to pay for that, so we've not made any assumptions on that.
Okay, so the sort of free travel scheme where we put taxes up in order to make something free. Yes.
Yeah.
That's fine. Okay, that's fine. And then also an Oliver question, so you have the same get out if you want. How did you manage to get Barnsley on board with this? I know Mick's going to squeak at me now, but
never suggest that I want to do anything.
But Barnsley, the vibe that I've got is that the Barnsley leadership, the Barnsley cabinet as an authority have been pretty resistant to this for really quite a number of years now. Absolutely delighted to see this week that they are now, fully on board, because it just fundamentally wouldn't work if one of the four weren't. I just wondered if we had sort of any inclination what the factors were that has finally achieved that buy-in.
Yes, please. I think from my perspective, I've been here 6 months, so I've not had all the history that maybe others have had. I can speak from my perspective, which is that we've talked an awful lot with officers, with politicians, obviously through this committee. I feel like I know you all very well, even though I've only been here 6 months, and I think kind of from my perspective, the assessment kind of is what it is. It sets out pretty kind of stark picture, and I think when that's explained and when that's understood, then people will kind of ultimately kind of draw their own conclusion. I think in Barnsley's case, we received their response to the consultation. I think a lot of recognition of some of the challenges faced in Barnsley and some of the challenges that the decline in the bus network has generated, and that came through really, I think, in the response.
Speak on this. We are to shadow of a doubt. We're very prudent in terms of our finances, and the position's being quite clear that any move by Barnsley Council needs to be clearly evidenced that it's a good plan and it's financially viable. let's remember, you know, Barnsley have paid for many years for tram services, and we've never quirked, and we don't get any advantage. Well, occasionally we do, but I wouldn't like to measure how much Barnsley population have done with that. But we've also got a collective responsibility because we're South Yorkshire, and if the case to be put. But remember, some of the aspirations of the Freedom Riders, which live in Barnsley, they live on Church Street at Jump, and I lived in Jump for, well, there's only Fran and George at Arthur, isn't there? So let's be fair about that, because he used to knock on my door every Thursday. So I'm a bit socialist worker. And so I do know it well. And Barnsley will always support wherever South Yorkshire want it to go in terms of it being financially, it stacks up financially, and it's got a delivery model for the whole of Barnsley.
I mean, if I can just come back in and just say in that case.
Very quickly, and then it's Brian,
Sorry,
and then
Brian.
it's Josh.
Congratulations to the team, because it was a hard sell, I think, Mick, to be fair, and clearly the evidence that's been presented has achieved that buy-in. So yeah, congratulations.
But I do know you've got an issue with Steve.
I think we've had that discussion. Can we now move on to other questions in the limited time we've got available? Brian first.
It's more on a comment, Chair, and I know where Barnsley's coming from, because sometimes it does have poor links to the rest of South Yorkshire, and it does. And that's more, my question is about making sure that when we do take control of buses, but with a proper integrated services, what links all up. Because I know for years and years and years, Rotherham were paying for a service which he didn't get for Sheffield trams, but now it's got the tram system into Rotherham. It's the best thing what ever happened, but you've got to make sure you get an integrated service, not just for where employment is, because employment's the most important thing, to make sure that people can get to work and from work, to get people to use buses and get cars off the road. But it's going to be a big task to get cars off the road. But also, and I was in Manchester the other week, and I visited Manchester. One of the things I found really nice and comfortable were I could just jump on a bus in city centre and go anywhere I wanted for now. So we're in a certain area, so that were good as well. So if that can be proved in certain places, it will work.
Thank you for that. Josh next, please. Did you just want a question?
Thank you, Chair. So I was just looking at the number of respondents, and Sheffield overwhelmingly carries most of the respondents. So I just wondered what the methodology was of spreading the consultation around South Yorkshire, and if anything was different in Sheffield as opposed to, for example, Barnsley or Rotherham, because ironically one of the responses negatively against franchising from this consultation was that the perception that Sheffield might, get more, and they've shouted more in this consultation anyway.
Yeah, so it's a self-selecting consultation, so that meant that everyone had the freedom to kind of pick whether or not that they were going to respond to the consultation. We did a pretty wide-ranging PR and media campaign because we wanted to try and reach as many people as possible, including bus users and non-users, but I think the reality is that people will be more engaged in something like this when they kind of use the service, and the fact is that there is a great level of bus use per head of population in Sheffield and in some other parts of the region. As we were going through the process and we started to kind of understand where some of the demographics and where people were responding from, we did see that I think it was particularly Rotherham and Doncaster. We were seeing lower levels of response than we had expected, so we did some quite targeted work in both of those areas. And whilst we didn't get a totally representative sample from each local authority area, which would have been quite difficult to achieve with a self-selecting approach, we felt that the numbers gave us a robust enough level where we could be kind of confident that represented the kind of the views of each area.
Okay, just one final question.
I may. I remember last time someone came to the committee, I don't know if it was you, but somebody talked about one way to up those responses was leafleting and stuff like that. So did any of that actually happen in the end then, in particular rural communities, just so that they were able to get this?
Yeah, we did some leafleting in, I think it was around a fifth of postcodes, and that was targeted at in areas where we felt we would normally kind of find it harder to reach people. So yes, we did that. We originally planned, I think, around 10 engagement events, but we extended that to about 30 events because, again, we felt that we needed to kind of do more outreach and kind of get out into community. So I think we did a pretty, when compared to other similar exercises, I think we did kind of quite a lot actually to kind of reach out and to do that. So yeah.
Mick?
I think Barnsley's record in terms of what we are looking at is this year's budget has put investment into travel for young people on our balanced budget, and there were no opposition to the travel for young people, were they, Anna?
No. Good use of
So
5 million of
we
reserves.
don't. Some people do to post things just for posting's sake. So what I do want to flag up though is I've got serious concerns in terms of franchising, targeting or supporting the areas of most need. And I'll give the example. We're now reconfiguring NHS in South Yorkshire. We've got services moving, unfortunately, from Barnsley to Mexborough and Rotherham and Sheffield. But what we need to be linking in with is the travel to get to those appointments in those communities, because we talk about Goldthorpe, and Goldthorpe is advantaged in some ways getting to Sheffield in terms of train station, which brings them into Sheffield, but that's not free transport, that's subsidised transport. But however, if you look at Royston, which is on border Wakefield, that is extremely difficult to get from Wakefield to Doncaster, Wakefield to Sheffield, or Royston to Sheffield. Having to travel through central Upper Barnsley to get everywhere. So we need to be looking at that in all seriousness, because when we look at train travel from Barnsley, I've mentioned this before, to Doncaster, we've got to go via Meadowhall. So we need to be looking at franchising bus services. We've got a bus an hour, X19, that travels from Doncaster to Barnsley, but it's limited stop and doesn't take in the surrounding villages. So we seriously need to look at pinch points in terms of reconfiguration at NHS and other services to ensure that we do the franchising to support the community's needs.
Yeah, because I know that at the consultations, one of my colleagues, Dr. Will Sapwell, actually said to the mayor that basically hospitals should be bus hubs as part of the routes, and then necessarily, from what you're saying, Mick, would then how feeding that in would be to follow when the services adjust some of the bus hubs appropriately. And do you think you would have that option in the franchising? And then Hannah can.
Yeah, I mean, the option is absolutely there. I think there's a lot of sense, and actually there's lots of examples of. I'm not sure about South Yorkshire, but in the country, of hospitals kind of acting as like mini bus stations or interchanges. Fact is, there's a lot of people need to visit hospitals, and there's a lot of people work in them, so there's actually kind of a lot of potential demand there. Then the opportunity is kind of better meeting some of that demand. Some of that's around shift times, appointment times, and the right kind of set of connections, and also the infrastructure that kind of needs to be there to facilitate that. But yeah, in terms of the options, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just in terms of that conversation, around need. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't go out to bat for my community. There's a lot. So I know there was some specific bus consultation in Penistone, which is the area that I represent. For a lot of my residents, a bus an hour that's a luxury. We're talking more like a bus every 3 hours if it turns up, and getting from Dunford Bridge over to Barnsley Hospital is already pretty difficult. Having to get further then through to Rotherham or Doncaster, you're looking at a full day's round trip, without a shadow of a doubt. So I was really pleased to see the sort of specific consultation in that more rural side of the borough. Particularly keen to build the links between Penistone and Stocksbridge, which is the constituency and the sort of the nearest part of Sheffield. I'm still hoping for a tram stop at Stocksbridge because that would make a massive difference. Tram stop at Stocksbridge, good bus links through from Penistone to Stocksbridge makes it all a lot easier. But I know that the more urban routes to some extent are the low hanging fruit. Really, I suspect one of the reasons Glossop have been so hammered is that it's actually quite a long way out to Glossop from Stockport and Greater Manchester. So yeah, just going out to bat for the rural communities really.
Ask Matt, just give us a brief overview of what you see the next steps, because I don't want you to rest on your laurels now that you've got this through after many years of resistance from parts of South Yorkshire. So what are the next steps? Because as a scrutiny committee, we would like to be looking at how you intend to implement franchising, for instance, what plans for the future there possibly be, like park and rides, because South Yorkshire is noticeably light on those, and how the franchising process will operate and how the engagement is like to happen, not just with the public but with the bus companies, in order to make sure that we have the network coverage at the right prices with the right level of service that we would look at. Can you just talk us through that, and then we can see when we would like to see you in again to give you another interrogation about what's going on?
Yeah, sure. So, in all honesty, our head's going to be down a little bit for the next few months because we need to take the decision and turn that into delivery. And as part of that is to kind of develop and validate what's going to be quite a large-scale program to deliver bus franchising. So a lot of our focus has been on the process to get to this week, but as of Wednesday morning, literally we met 9 o'clock on Wednesday morning to start to talk about what's going to happen next. So that work to kind of develop and validate the program is happening, and will probably take, I'd say, 3 to 4 months. At the same time, we're building the team as well that's going to take this forward, and some of those people are people that already work in the organisation. Some of those people are new hires, so some people will be joining us over the coming weeks and months to kind of give us some boots on the ground and some practical support and some technical expertise as well. So that's happening and will be happening over the next few months. In terms of kind of the priorities then within that programme, there are a few critical tasks as I see them that we need to be kind of getting on with very quickly. One of those is around depots. So to deliver a bus system, you need operating depots, and we've identified a model which has what we call anchor contracts around key depots in each of the areas. So we're doing work again just to revalidate those operating centres, and then we will need to start a process of either acquiring or building depots, but that's going to need to start to happen quite quickly. Depots are informed by the network, so we need to make sure that the network and the depots are kind of coexisting with each other. So we also need to start work around the engagement that I mentioned before and that network design. So I anticipate that at some point this year, I don't want to put a date on it yet, but at some point this year, we'll certainly for tranche 1, which is Sheffield and Doncaster, that we will start to come and talk to you about the ideas and the proposals and to see what you think and what your priorities are for the network. And then the third one is around bus fleet. So we have a real challenge in South Yorkshire, which is articulated in the consultation and in the assessment around the age of the fleet. The average age of a bus in South Yorkshire is approaching 12 years. The economic life of a bus, as we would judge it, is 15 years. So effectively, a bus isn't worth anything on the balance sheet after 15 years. So we've got a fundamental problem that we need to fix within that. So we also need to turn our attention to fleet. What new fleet do we need to bring in to support franchising, but also to support decarbonisation? Because if we bring new vehicles in an ideal world, we'd want those to be zero emission. And then that links back round to the depot question as well. So those are starting to emerge as kind of the things that we're going to need to really start to get a grip of over the next few months.
Thank you for that. Peter, I think you've got one final question.
Thank you, Chair. How are you going to ensure public engagement in developing the scheme? You know, how are we going to involve the users in the development of moving forward? Thank you.
Yeah, a really important point that I think I've hopefully kind of articulated the work that we intend to do around network design. So it's really important that we engage users, but I think as important that we engage non-users as well, people who don't or can't use the bus. How if we're going to grow bus patronage, we're going to need some of those people to kind of feed into that process, tell us why they don't use the bus and what would help them to make potentially a different choice. So we will be doing lots of engagement around the network, but also on other aspects of the bus offer. So an example of that would be new buses. So if we're going to buy potentially hundreds of new buses for South Yorkshire, then how are we making sure that we feed in the needs of people in South Yorkshire? So I will be very keen that we do kind of lots of work with users and focus groups and groups of people with maybe physical disabilities or other disabilities around the design, the actual design of the vehicle, the types of things that people would wish to see and how we can incorporate those into the design. So we will be exactly how we will do it. I don't know yet, but there's an absolute commitment to lots of engagement on the kind of the key aspects of what we see the bus offer to be in the future.
And on that engagement, but also involving residents, citizens in decision making. So not just asking them what they think and then deciding for them what they want, but involving them in decision making.
Yeah, and I think we'd be really open to suggestions around how we may make that happen.
A couple of quick questions from Brian.
So you talked about the bus fleet then. So we will be looking at a low carbon bus fleet, like the new buses what we've got between Barnsley and Rotherham, the electric buses. We will be looking at those kind of buses. And what's the additional cost of staffing then going to be to actually fetch this programme forward? When you talked about you'll be looking at, you need additional staff, but some of the staff are already employed here and there'd just be a movement. So what kind of costing are we looking at staffing then to push this forward?
So in terms of the electric buses, the assessment was done on the basis of 1 in 3 new buses being electric for until I think 2032, and then after that all new buses being electric. But there may be an opportunity to kind of flex that and do things a little bit differently. But that depends a lot on the infrastructure that we can put in and the amount of power that we can get to a depot, and that's all work that's ongoing. So the two things are interlinked. Ideally, we would want every new bus to be electric, and that is hopefully kind of what we will strive for. But it's as equally important as we actually get a service delivered on day one as well. So we will need to kind of work within those parameters. What I would say is that a brand new Euro 6 diesel bus emits about 97% less emissions than a Euro 5 standard bus, so you already get massive emissions improvements even with the latest diesel ultra low emission buses. And then in terms of staff, the exact numbers are being worked up, but there's a transition budget that's already been agreed by the MCA of £5 million to support the recruitment of staff and the onboarding of consultants that we will undoubtedly need through the next part of the process.
Thank you.
Right, thank you very much for that, Matt. I'm sure we're going to see you sometime in the autumn. I mean, if not sooner, with interim briefings with things going on, and we'd like to ask more questions because obviously this is primarily about a consultation. Thank you very much for your time that you've given us and the body of work that has been produced by the team. I want to say to get to this stage after many false starts across South Yorkshire. Right, we move on to item 12, which is the corporate engagement framework. Unfortunately, now, due to exceptional circumstances, no officer will be will be able to attend to present item 12. South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority Corporate Engagement Framework. Members may still wish to discuss and ask questions, which we can take away. But please note the officers in the room won't be in a position to respond on the spot. So if anybody's got any questions they want to have taken away, then please raise your hand now. And then we'll bring it back later. Bring it back later, and please forward any emails or any questions, etc., to Sarah. Please, thank you very much. We now move on to item 13, which is the draft Overview and Scrutiny Committee Chair's report. Annual report. Thanks all for computing your annual committee survey, if you did. The report aims to demonstrate how our committee has fulfilled its terms of reference and provided a scrutiny function to the MCA during the year. It also sets out an improvement plan for 25-26 with the aim of improving committee effectiveness and working towards implementation of the scrutiny protocol. Do you have anything to add? And I'll ask Sarah to add anything she wishes to.
Yep, so it is a draft, so there's suggestions for things like highlights of the year, improvement for next year, but very much open to feedback now or by email outside of meetings about highlights to include, things to improve. It's really up to you. Some of the headlines from your effectiveness exercise. So we ran a survey and delivered a workshop with members. So members feel that you've got a strong grasp of the role and the skills to be able to deliver the function. There's welcoming of more kind of technical expertise and training around things like measuring outcomes metrics of the MCA's performance. Some feedback around kind of good relationships with officers and space to grow other relationships with the board and the mayor and portfolio holders. There's a consistent theme throughout around kind of ambitions to grow and improve, but also that members don't have a great deal of capacity to be able to allocate, and we don't have kind of an off-the-shelf solution for what scrutiny always looks like at a combined authority, so very much to be shaped by us, by you, and all of that can be fed into the final product, which would go to the MCA board in June at the AGM.
Just one thing, can you update the attendance before it goes to the...
Yeah, the attendance is based on meetings that have happened, but we will reflect this meeting also.
Any questions for anybody around the room? Right, okay.
Question.
Oh, Hannah.
They just jumped into my head. How many members did fill in that survey in the end, Sarah?
I think so we got, based on the substantive membership, so 10 members, not reserves, it was 80%, so 8 members.
Okay, that's pretty good.
That's impressive. I think it's a slight improvement from last year, isn't it? I think. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it was lower than that.
It's been 70 last year, but I've only joined this year.
No, but out of the 10, out of the 10 last year, yeah, that's right. So basically, I'd like to personally thank Sarah for her work on this, because it's something we need to do, especially as we're confronted with English devolution bills coming up, with uncertainty about what the exact roles of the committees are, what the committee will be, what additional functions we may be given. Obviously, together with the implementation, I know Josh has been quite active in this, in implementation of scrutiny protocol and how we move forward with that. So there are all these unknowns. So we've got, and to put us with the annual report here, to put us in good stead here, so that we have the ability to move forward. I think that's something that's to be welcomed, and particular thanks, and also Rebecca as well. Thank you. But that's the thing is, we, as a scrutiny committee, we will have much more to have a look at as the mayoralty develops its functions and the roles under the new government legislation. That's one of the things we have to make sure that we continue doing the job. Hannah.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo that. I think my responses sort of throughout the survey were sort of fairly consistently, it's brilliant, we're offered absolutely loads and loads of stuff, loads and loads of support. The question for me is always whether I've got the capacity to sort of pick that up or not. So yeah, thank you. And it was a very good survey as well. I have a bit of a habit of losing the will to live halfway through lengthy surveys and sort of bailing out and stopping, and it kept my attention all the way through. So yeah, really well constructed. That's probably why your response rate was so high.
Anybody else anything to add with that? Anyway, thank you very much for that. We'll close on that item. So we recommend to finalise complete report to the MCA with just the slight updates. Right, okay. Finally, this is the final meeting of the municipal year. Thank you to members for your continued contributions and work as part of the MCA this year. It'd be nice to see that we would have a group of members that carry on the expertise, the engagement that's been going on, and the build up of knowledge, but we don't know because there are other things coming down the line in Doncaster, for instance. So with local elections coming up, and look forward to June, isn't it? The next meeting is in June. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.